about the square miles is lesser than Woonsocket, the flows is going to be lesser. What I want to impress upon you folks is to understand the peaks between the two. Okay, next slide, please. What's critical knowledge here is that if you have an event that covers the entire basin as we had in October 2005, there is an 8-hour time difference between when North Bridge peaks and when Woonsocket peaks. So basically, if you're sitting out there, you know, at this time step, and you live somewhere in Woonsocket, the rivers is still going to continue rising out. So if you're looking at North Bridge and you say, it's just about cresting, one can extrapolate based on an event that covers the entire basin, the Blackstone Basin, that you have an 8-hour period of window where you still have to watch that river rising. So therefore, the question now posed, which Dave posed, what if you're sitting time step here, is what do you do? Do you have enough time to mitigate this problem? Okay? If you're sitting downstream, you know, do I have enough staff to help me move the vehicles out of the parking lot? Those are situations and questions that I believe this forum will try to answer or work out. Next slide, please. So to sum it up, the third R is about river levels, understanding river levels. And I know we're running short on time, so we'll fly to the next slide, please. So basically, I've covered the 3 R's of hydrology. I believe the National Weather Service is an integral part of understanding the emerging conditions, understanding initial conditions. I believe that we're part of the thinking process, part of linking and understanding what's happening, and basically be part of the outcome and solutions of this forum. Next slide, please. And there are resources to help that we believe that we can help the community. And this is basically one of the doorsteps where you can get information. And this link is on your handouts. From this link, you will bring you to the next slide, to the AHABS page, okay? Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Services. Because we do provide forecasts, as Dave has said. You know, there's forecasts that's short-term, that's 3 days out. We also provide forecasts that could be up to 30 days out. Information is here for you. The resources are here, and I hope that we can share more of our resources.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Veronica.
We were very surprised quickly when we learned about your facility and the fact that we have a river forecast center. We worked along the river and we didn't know it, and we're going to be like this from now on. So thanks. My portion is to say impacts, talk about what are the damages that we experienced. When you were having breakfast, you had a presentation going on. That presentation is available for you. Just let me know when we finish, and I'll be glad to send that presentation along. A couple of impacts. We have different weather conditions, but we also have a different river. There are different things going on along the river. We have recreation. We have people living along the river that we didn't have to. I think that's not an impact, but that's a condition that we need to have in our heads. We had the second worst flood after 1955. We estimate that we have $40 million of damage, which include federal, state, local, and business money. Interestingly, $50 million is the federal investment that has been done in 20 years. Woonsocket is able to treat 16 million gallons a day of sewage. That day, we had 40 millions of untreated sewage flowing through. In Millbury, in Upper Blackstone, there were 120 million gallons of untreated sewage coming down into the Blackstone River. Hope Global estimates $5 million of loss. Pat, I don't know how much. Thank you. BVTC lost approximately $25,000. We couldn't continue our operations of the boats. We lost part of the season, plus we had to beg those lines to keep the salmon later alive, which it would not have been only a loss for us, but that boat going down the river would have caused a lot of damage. Narragansett Bay was shut down for a week. As I said before, no one remembers when was the last time that happened. And lastly, at least Pawtucket had to, yeah.
I'm sorry, would you say Narragansett Bay was shut down? What does that mean, shut down?
It means that they couldn't operate. They couldn't operate.
No maritime traffic, is that what it means?
Yeah. Is that? I mean, they couldn't. Shellfish. Yeah. Shellfish. And in Pawtucket, we had to go back to bottled water. We couldn't drink tap water for a couple of weeks. So.
And they ran out of bottled water as well.
Yeah, in Cumberland. And with that, these are the tangible impacts. When we went in a tour with Congressman Kennedy and Charlie Hawkins, Senator, Senator Reid, we not only saw these businesses and the federal investment and the local and the state, but residents. And we went to Sergio Sousa's house, for example, and they lost everything. They lost everything. So there's more than the economic impact. There's a social, there's a moral, and there's also an environmental side of it. But there are tangible and intangible impacts that we need to have in mind.
Very good. Thanks very much, Veronica. Who's next? Hope Global. Gentleman from Hope Global.
My name is Jim Hanahan. I've worked at Hope Global now for about 20 years. And back in October, I had the opportunity to be in the plant Saturday morning. And what I want to do is talk to you about what really happened, what a first-hand experience of what we went through. Saturday morning, there were a handful of us in the office at 8 o'clock working on our 2006 budget in hopes of getting it completed. 9 o'clock, 9:30, we started to look out in the parking lot. And as happened many times before, almost annually, when the river comes up, the storm drains bring water into our parking lot. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's our gauge of what transpires. We've seen it every year. Didn't think much about it. 10:30 rolls around, the parking lot's looking pretty bad. In fact, we moved our cars to higher ground just to make sure that we didn't get our feet wet when we decided to leave. 11 o'clock rolls around, we say, it's getting pretty bad. We've seen this before. Let's get out before it gets too deep. The Cumberland police were driving down the driveway as we had made the decision to leave. And thank God they did. They said, clear the area, get everybody out, because we were running essentially a third of our production are going to continue to run. We do have some high ground down there that doesn't typically get wet. Later in the afternoon, there were several calls put out. We went back down to the mill, and at that time, the Cumberland police had roped off the area. They'd allowed a couple of us to go back into the building. We went back in the building. We began taking computers, putting them up on desks. We carried our server upstairs. We turned off electricity. for us, it was devastating to see what was happening. It was something we'll never forget. Walking through the middle of our plant, which was constructed in thirds, we have a very large aisleway right down the center, about 10 foot wide. And it reminded me of a picture of the Colorado River when, when the water was up. When the water came down, we were able to go back in. Monday morning, we got down to the Martin Street at 5 o'clock in the morning and realized we couldn't get to the plant because there was no more road. Because of the construction on the bridge there, the river, when it came up, went around the pylons and cut a 10-foot ditch right where we go in. We're very fortunate that the town of Cumberland jumped right in, was very participatory in helping us. We went across the street to Lynch. They jumped right on trucks, got us going. The cops were very, very helpful in keeping things under control because there were a number of media, if you will, onlookers, people coming down to see. You can't believe what can happen during a catastrophe, the number of folks that want to see what the catastrophe is. For us, it was troublesome in that we had trucks that we needed to get in, supplies that we needed to get in. Within 3 days, we were able to take 6 inches of mud out of enough areas to get production started back up. We were very, very fortunate in that 2/3 of our finished goods inventory were in racks 2 and 3 and were not hit by the flood. As was mentioned before, we lost essentially $3 million in inventory. Had we had some kind of notification in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 hours, we could have saved a bundle of that inventory by moving it to a plant that we have 3 miles away on high ground. In spite of what transpired, we're very, very thankful that we have a strong communication with the Chamber of Commerce. There were a number of people from the state and certainly from the town of Cumberland that came in and supported our efforts. The mayor of Cumberland was very, very instrumental in getting us office space to continue operations. Believe it or not, we deal with the automobile industry, and they're very demanding in what they require from suppliers. They will think nothing of having you make a Federal Express shipment at your expense if you are 1 day late in shipping. We were very, very fortunate in that with all the outside support, we incurred only $4,000 in premium freight, which we feel very, very fortunate about. We were able to get operations up, and within the 3rd week, we were essentially 80% of what we had been. And we couldn't have done that without the town, without all the support that we got. But today, we're back operational, and as Veronica mentioned, we did lose to the tune of $5 million. That's all I have to say today. Thank you very much.
Okay, Laurie Adamo from Code Red. Laurie's going to talk about disaster mitigation from the business perspective, organizational perspective.
Okay, good. All right, so Code Red Business Continuity Services. I'm actually here from the business perspective. I know there's a lot of first responders and the public side of things today, which is great, and I commend the Blackstone Valley Tourism Council and the Northern Rhode Island Chamber for putting this together. And I commend the small businesses and the big businesses that are here because it's very important. This dialogue is very, very important to find out what we can do better. I know the public side of things, they know what they need to do, and they know how to coordinate, and they actually practice events like this. But the business side of things, I think we need to work a little more. I think we need to coordinate efforts a little bit more, and we need to really bring some successes forward. So that's why I'm here. Code Red basically helps businesses plan for disruption and disaster. There's 3 points, and I have a very brief 3 minutes, like the gentleman from Raytheon said, 3 minutes, so I'm going to be very quick. 3 words: readiness, response, and recovery. Businesses need to think about this. readiness, response, and recovery. And I know a lot of businesses do. They have emergency response plans. I know OSHA expects that there's some sort of evacuation process, that they understand some emergency procedures within their structure. Small businesses, I think, are more likely not to have that sort of planning and that sort of simulation training and exercise. But I think every business, whether it's small or large, need to understand, A, their vulnerabilities. What does that mean? What as a business am I most exposed to? Well, today we're talking about flooding. And flood is certainly something that the Blackstone River and the businesses who are sitting next to it are going to expect. That is a threat. That is a larger exposure to them. There's other exposures. Larry mentioned the avian flu. Well, what we do is we look at historical data. What has happened in the past? Well, flooding has happened in the past. The avian flu, we've heard that in the newspaper. What are businesses up against? The pandemic influenza. It's based on a 30-year cycle. What they expect will happen within a 30-year cycle, and eventually we see the bird flu coming through. Hopefully it won't reach our borders, but that's basically something that we need to be concerned with. We need to be concerned with a lot of emergencies. Today, again, we're talking about flooding. Vulnerability assessments are based on historical data, internal threats, external threats, staff situations. Maybe there's been some violent behavior that I need to make sure I understand and address. Crime statistics in your area, all that information. What has happened in the past and what do I need to do to mitigate, lessen the injury, lessen what can happen from this threat. So vulnerability assessments, before you create a plan, very important. So then you can take that foundational information, that understanding of threat, and move it into a disaster plan. There's a lot of different discussions about disaster plans, crisis management plans, disaster plan, emergency response plan, business continuity. Business continuity is actually how a business recovers from disruption. What do we need to do to recover? How much time do I have before my business starts to suffer and fail? What do I need to do to make sure my vendors and my suppliers and my customers are satisfied? My reputation, all those things are very, very important to a business. So as the first responders are working their side of the fence and making sure that they take care of life safety issues and responding to the various incidences, businesses also need to understand that they have to do the same thing. Incident command system is something that I know the first responders work off of. I truly believe that businesses need to also work off their incident command system. Who's going to declare the emergency? Who's going to be the one that makes decisions? And who's going to make sure that life safety issues are taken care of? It takes approximately 8 to 9 minutes here in Rhode Island for first responders to get to your site, whether it's a business, your home, or whatever. So those 8 to 9 minutes are crucial. What decisions do I need to make? And you know what? You don't want to be making decisions that are life safety decisions off the cuff. You need to play the what if game. What do I do if this happens? What do I do if that happens? The plan that you're creating from the vulnerabilities will give you that information and will create a plan that will help a company respond accordingly. And I'm not saying that any business in this room has not done that. It's basically making sure that the plan works ultimately at the end. So vulnerability assessment, plan development, and ultimately testing. If a plan is developed and you've got it on your shelf and it's sitting there collecting dust, then shame on you. Again, the first responders in the public sector are very good at simulation exercises, making sure that plans work. And businesses need to do the same thing. If I'm a business that sits on the waterway in the Blackstone River, I'm going to simulate an exercise that says, I've got a lot of water coming into my site. What do I do? What do my employees do? What do we do to move the building or the operations off-site so that we can operate 3 miles away? That's awesome. A lot of businesses setting up a hot site in another location to make sure that they can continue business in the face of disruption is key. And also, this gentleman mentioned from Hope Global Communications and notification. That's also key. So we talked about vulnerabilities and understanding them, creating the plan to mitigate the risk, and exercising and testing that plan. Businesses must take care of their own. And coordination between the first responders, the public, private sector. Certainly understand